Today is steak day, and we're going to be talking about how to make the best steak at home and to avoid all of the mistakes that you could make. There are so many different cuts of steak, and I am not a butcher. So if you are interested in learning more about different cuts, I would watch a video by a butcher. But for me today, I'm just cooking with a New York strip. My favorite way to serve a steak is to have it seared and crispy golden brown on the outside and juicy on the inside. The first step in achieving that sear is to dry off your steaks. The moisture is the enemy when you're trying to achieve that golden brown exterior. You want it to be as dry as possible. Always use a large plastic cutting board when you're preparing meat. It's just easier to clean, and even for some of them, you can just put them in the dishwasher. All right, let's season our beautiful steaks. There's this whole thing about dry rub and seasoning, marinating, but I genuinely believe with a great steak, salt is key and pepper is fabulous. Salt is the most important thing though. Like that's, if there's one thing you're gonna take away from this, it's salt the shit out of your steaks, okay? And I'm not talking about sea salt because then you're gonna over salt it, which is something I've done. That is a mistake you don't wanna make. I'm talking about kosher salt. The salt that I have is Diamond kosher salt. It's very mild, so it's harder to over salt by using this. And I'm gonna flip and season the other side. So for the pepper, you can just use pepper straight out of a pepper mill and have it coarsely ground onto the steak. If you're gonna use table pepper, like the one that's pre-ground, it's not even worth your time. Just skip it. It's honestly gonna make it taste worse. So once the steaks are all seasoned, I'm just dipping the fat in that salt and kind of grabbing any other seasoning that I missed. So I wanna let these sit for about 15 minutes at room temp. It's gonna absorb flavor from the salt and the pepper, and when it's at room temperature, it's easier to cook. There's a whole debate around that, but I do believe having a room temperature steak is better because it doesn't make your pan colder and disrupt the heat that you need to get that perfect sear. During this time, you should just prep what you need for your butter basting or your pan sauce. For me, I have crushed some garlic and I have some thyme, keeping it simple. I also have a shallot. I might use it, I don't know yet, but just examples of aromatics you can use for a pan sauce. The thing about a good steak is that it usually has fat. And there are two kinds of fat. There's the fat around the edges, and then there's this marbling fat that occurs in between the muscle. What happens when you cook a steak with a lot of delicious marbling is that that fat melts into the meat and makes it more tender and juicy. Now, the other kind of fat that we have is the fat on the edge. And what I love to do, because you have to use a fat in the pan when you're cooking a steak, I like to use the fat. So what I like to do is score the fat before I even get to the pan. This is during that 15-minute resting period. Just make a few little cuts, shallow cuts. You don't want to cut into the meat. And this just allows the fat to release in the pan more easily. The way that you do not overcook a steak and you can have total certainty that you are on top of your game is by having an internal thermometer. They're really cheap. They have digital ones now. I highly recommend it for this and so many other things in the kitchen. So if you're serious about upping your cooking game with the steaks, just get one. All right, let's go to the stove. I like to use a cast iron skillet for searing steaks because it is the most heavy duty metal. It retains heat extremely well, which means even cooking. And if you're working with a really thick steak, you can pop it in the oven as well. It's just the best. I set my heat to high. I want it to be very, very hot. In terms of cooking oils, I recommend using vegetable oil, canola oil, avocado oil, any neutral oil that has a higher smoke point. My pan is so hot. I let it heat up for about 3 minutes. I'm gonna put a little bit of vegetable oil in the pan. And we're gonna do it fat side down real quick. Woo! The point of this is just to get a little more flavor in the pan. Look at that color on that fat. That's fat that has been rendered off All right, so I seared the first side for 2 to 3 minutes. Now I'm flipping it. Look at that golden brown crust. All right, we are at 99 on this one and 85 on the thicker one. This one's a little thinner. So what we're gonna do, when this one hits 115 or 120, I'm gonna take it out of the pan. I'm gonna then let this one hit 115 or 120. Once it does, we are lowering the heat and we're gonna butter baste both of them. All right, so I've removed my steak from the pan and I'm gonna turn the heat off and just let this chill out for a second. If you had spices on your steak and they burned, I recommend just wiping the pan up once it cools off. I'm gonna put my pan on a medium low. We're gonna grab some cold butter. I'm gonna add about, it's a big pan. I'm gonna add 4 self-measured tablespoons. Some garlic. Butter and garlic burn easily, so that's why our heat is low. I'm also gonna add some thyme. Add the steak back in. We're gonna go back to this butter here. We're gonna grab it with a large spoon and just give our steak a butter bath. Ooh. I like to tilt the pan like this. I know cast irons are really heavy, so if you do not want to tilt the pan, you can just continue to move the steak around and then flip it and give it this bath. But this really infuses a lot of flavor. Now that we're done the cooking process and we are 10 degrees before our goal temperature, we're gonna let them rest. We are letting them rest. And what happens when you let your steak rest is the juices redistribute and it actually continues to cook. So that's why we took it off the heat 10 degrees before the goal temperature. You can totally use your hand here. I just used some mini tongs. Look at this sexy steak. For our smaller one, same thing. I'm cutting on a bias here. It's on the rare, the medium side of medium rare, but it's still medium rare, which I feel fine about. I'm gonna give this a try. The flavor is so good. That tastes really delicious. Everything we did in the process made it taste delicious, from the seasoning to drying it off to searing to the butter bath, which you cannot skip. It takes any subpar piece of meat and it turns it into this, or anything that you would get at a restaurant. So definitely try these methods and make it your own. Do what you're comfortable with. Definitely get an internal thermometer. Most importantly, enjoy the steak. Okay, I'm gonna go eat this steak, but I will see you guys later. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Bye.